Hello, everybody, and welcome to another 80s golden age of comedy. This is a different kind of show. We're outside, and I am with a living legend. I know he's a Boston guy, and I lived in Boston for 10 years.
I didn't know that.
And I know Boston people. They're really shy.
They are.
You know, you know that joke, they only want to be in the newspapers twice in their life. You know what that joke is?
No, born and dead.
Okay.
Arrive and depart.
Yes, that's it. Or else they don't want to be noticed. But you, I saw you perform, Don Gavin. I saw you perform the other night, and I have to admit, I didn't know you or know of you. I'm sorry.
You're not alone.
And I said, so who is this older guy here with these younger guys? And I said, he's very shy. You didn't say a word to me.
No.
And I'm saying, you know, who is this guy? And then I saw you perform on stage. Oh my God. And I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
Because, again, you're soft-spoken. Older than the 30s.
You're emphasizing that, okay.
And the 40s and the 50s. And I'm saying, what is this guy going to do? Because none of the guys told me. I was sitting in the back with you guys relaxing.
Yep.
And I knew Bruce Smirnoff, and I knew of Richie. I didn't know of anybody else, actually. Jimmy walked in like larger than life. I said, who is this guy, the mayor?
Yeah.
I had no idea who Jimmy Schubert was.
Yeah.
And so the whole night was a surprise for me. And I hope you didn't think I was like invading it all, did you?
Well, I know you knew some of the other guys, so
Yeah.
I said, yeah.
Okay. So when I saw you perform, you shocked the heck out of me. You had the audience, they were in stitches, howling loud laughs. And I said, oh my, you just never know. I said, this guy is a seasoned professional. I didn't know anything about the Godfather of Boston Comedy. I didn't know any of this because I don't go in there and ask questions.
Right.
And you just killed. So I said to myself, I need to get to know this guy, and I need to get to know his story.
Good enough.
So thank you for spending time with
All right,
me.
Bruce.
So tell me about Little Don.
Little Don.
Where did Little Don grow up, and did your growing up process lead you at all into comedy, or if not,
No,
how
not.
did you find out about comedy?
Not really. I was, I'm a Boston bred and lived there pretty much all my life. And growing up, no, I wouldn't even have any inclination or any knowledge that this is what I'd be doing for most of my life. When I got out of high school and college, I was a teacher. I was a high school teacher, and then I was a guidance counselor, and I was coach for a couple of sports. So I did that for about 14 years. And then the comedy scene, this was way back 1979, was just beginning a little bit in Boston. There was a comedy scene in LA at the time, and there was one in New York. And that's about it. And there was no such thing as like comedy clubs, So people would work, like Jay Leno was one of the first ones out of Boston, but he worked at strip joints, and he worked at car dealership things, and he used to drive limos and stuff back and forth from New York. And when he went down to New York, he'd work a few of the clubs there. But there was Playboy Club was one that had comedians occasionally in Boston, but I never worked there because I was busy being a teacher, and so there really wasn't any comedy. And then they started off doing one night a week comedy at the Comedy Connection, and I heard about that, and I said, I'll take a look at it, not thinking to perform, just to see what it was. And I went. And I had never been on stage. I'd never been in a play, never done any of that. I was a bartender for many, many years. So I think that kind of honed the skills of being sarcastic and humorous, I guess. And so I had a little patter, but I never performed. So when I saw them these supposed to be professionals in Boston, I'm going, wow. And there were 3 or 4 guys, and I was kind of impressed.
You remember who they were?
Yeah, Steve Sweeney was one. and a guy named Sean Morey. Do you remember
Oh,
Sean?
I know Sean. Went to Northeastern with him.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sean was one of the first. He got on the Tonight Show. He was one of the first out of Boston, and he's the one that started this one night of comedy. He was like the host, and Lenny Clark was another Boston guy, and let me see. In those days, that would have been some of the guys. A guy named Bill Campbell he was a teacher also. There were a number of guys that were teachers, so I saw that. So anyway, I went and kind of enjoyed it. Not planning on doing anything about it. And then I went another time, and I said, yeah, that might be interested. And I saw one guy who I won't mention his name, and I said, I'm better than that guy, So if this guy has no idea that he got me into comedy, because I didn't want to embarrass myself. And the way to get in, the audition process was two guys, Bill Downs and Paul Barkley, who ran this thing. You would just, in the back room, to just do something for them. And I remember going in and saying, this is not going to work at all. I said it to them. I said, because the two of you, I don't think either one of you are going to understand what I'm doing. So even if I lose one of you, I'm losing 50% of the group here. But it went fine, and they had me come in the next week. And good and bad, I did terrific the very first time. I was nervous as hell, but it was a rush,
Where'd you get the material from? Just from wise-assing at the bars?
Yeah, and just stories and, stories of, personal stuff and observational things. I think that, not to compare, but like a George Carlin type of direction, I guess. And it went terrific. And then they had me back again, and I did the same 10 or 12 minutes, and it was terrific again.
Wow.
So now, the third time, I think that, I'm becoming a comedian. So I wrote, and you would know, I wrote that week, I wrote 15 minutes of comedy, which is, no, thank you. And so I went up the third time, and I was getting crap from like Lenny Clark, other people would say, have you been working in New York? How long have you been doing it? I said, I never did this in my life, And he was accusing me of being a liar, and he was looking into something. So the third time, I was horrible because it was all stuff that I had made up that week. And if you can write 1 minute a week, that's pretty good. That's almost an hour of comedy. So, but it was, and that's when I found out about the flop sweats and the dry mouth and the wet hands and it was just, it was hard. And when I got off stage, Lenny Clark told me, yeah, that was really good. And we had a fight. We had a fist fight at the club that night. Yeah. I said, is language a problem on this?
No.
Okay. Because I said, hey, fuck you, and boom, boom, boom.
Boston guys.
And then we became friends after that. And I realized there was somewhat of a camaraderie of the people because no one knew what they were doing. People say, what about, there was an LA style, there was a New York style, but then Boston was unique. We mentioned earlier.
Just starting. Yeah. Everything was just starting.
And people that came in later, like Paul Poundstone and Stephen Wright, people like that, Jim Morris, and a number of different people, all different directions to how they did it, because we didn't know. They called it the Boston format, where I would be the headliner, per se, but I would have 3 or 4 acts, but I would also be the host. And by doing that, I could control how the show was going to go. Like if you got up and did well, I'd let you do a little more. And if you're not, I'd yank you. So that's how that developed. That went on for years. That even though I was the headliner, I was the host also. Wow. And it seemed to work. That hardly anybody does that anymore, but that was going on for years and years. But I had a slew of people that really were, in effect, headline comedians. So, and it was very difficult to break into the scene in Boston once it got going, because a multitude of different styles and comedians here, so it was kind of a closed shop. People came from New York, and we used to like to torture them. Just give them 4 barrels, one after another, and like Colin Quinn tells great stories about it coming into Boston.
At least he was an Irish guy.
Yeah, well, that was
you
an
let
in.
Him in,
that was
you?
an in, but the fact he was from New York, that was, and he actually said when he was there, he said, don't mention I'm from New York, but you could tell in about 2 seconds anyway, and he would get booed, and he went on one.
It's that Red Sox Yankee thing across the board.
Sure. We had a sound booth next to the stage, and you had to walk through the sound booth and then through the crowd to get off. And he got off stage, went in the sound booth, and stayed there for the rest of the night. Refused to walk out through the crowd.
I've had that treatment out at Fenway Park
Yeah.
In the bleachers.
Yeah, oh, sure.
know, if I was-
Were you wearing the garb?
I might have been, and you're lucky if you get out alive. I don't mean that, but beer and popcorn and stuff thrown at you.
Oh man,
it was a fun days.
Well, the bleachers there was heckle party, yeah.
And people, you know what? Most of the people went out to the bleachers. They didn't want to sit.
Right.
That's where the fun was.
Yeah, that's right.
I remember going to getting some seats and sitting, behind the dugout or something, and going, "This is no fun."
Yeah, you're not with the people. And there was all kinds of gambling going on, and there was a lot of fisticuffs. There was a lot of activity in the bleachers. Yeah, if you wanted to have fun, that's where you would go. That would be it.
So I was lucky enough at least to see that video about Boston comedy.
Right.
Tell me about that. I mean, that just opened up my eyes. I went to Northeastern University with Sean.
Sure.
I went from 71 to 76, but I stayed another 5 years. I had no idea. Now, I was dating, and what a great thing would have been to go to the comedy club. I had no idea that you guys had comedy clubs.
Yeah, well, we're just beginning in that time. And to get it off the ground it was still only one night a week they were doing it, and then they Thursday night, of course. Why Thursday, I don't know, but and then they expanded a little bit, and then we opened a place called the Ding Ho Comedy Club.
I heard about it.
And that movie you were talking about, Fran Solomita did a terrific job producing and directing that, and it was called When Stand Up Stood Out, and it kind of gives you an overview of how...
A real feel. It really did.
Yeah.
The bawdiness, the loudness, the drunkenness, the camaraderie, the creativity. They did a great job. I learned a lot.
Yeah, we used to, when I expanded a little bit, you would go, and now I was still teaching at the time, so I was staying out to 2 and 3 in the morning and getting up at 6 to go. I don't know how much of a teacher I was the last couple of years. Just sleep deprived and probably still a little drunk, maybe.
Did you try some of your material on the kids, of course? You stayed really clean?
Not too much. The very last year I did, because some of them knew what I did. But they wouldn't know it from being in the school. I was in a vocational school where the discipline was the primary thing that you were concerned with. So, but the last year I did. If some of the students were better, I put on a couple of shows then, but then I knew I was getting out of this, and the realization that I was going to do comedy. I was driving home from school, 3:00. And I fell asleep driving, and was over. Hit a guardrail, went up on the top of the guardrail, and I'm hitting the stanchions, bing, bing, bing. And people say your life passes through your eyes. No, what passed through my eyes was, how am I going to make it to the show tonight? Because I'm going to total the car here. And I went through the windshield, the whole thing, and I was stumbled back up onto the highway, and blood all over me, and had to go to the hospital. And I'm still concerned about the show. Now, I wasn't even concerned about going to teach the next day. I was concerned about the show. So that's kind of when I made a decision. So I lasted the rest of that year, and then did whatever. So then I quit bartending, but there was enough work.
The money started
We
coming
started
around?
to create.
When did you start getting paid? Because in L.A.
Well, in those days it was $10 or $12, and then $25 or $50. And Barry Crimmins started a place, the Ding Ho, as I mentioned, with Steve Sweeney, myself, and Lenny, and a few other guys. And that he paid more money, maybe what we deserved, which was not being done. Like at the Improv, they had to go out and strike and all that.
$15. No, but they didn't have anything.
Yes.
And then in '79 the strike.
Right.
And at least they walked away with $15 or $20 a set. And out in L.A., it's expensive to live out there.
Yeah, and Bud Friedman just said they should be paying me. That was his, and he really believed it. And so did Mitzi, and so the Improv, the Comedy, all those ones. They never even considered paying. If people are paying to get into the show, why wouldn't the talent get paid? Never understood that. So Barry Crimmins did understand it, and he was a performer himself. So he made it more equitable that we were getting some of the cash.
That's good.
Yeah, and then a few other places opened up. I opened a place called Nick's Comedy Stop, and worked there. I had my own show on Saturday night. Worked there for 9 years, missing maybe 5 weekends total. So you didn't have to travel. So that's one of the reasons that people don't know who I am, because I just stayed there. And it gets so big. When we first did it, it was like a tax write-off. But it got popular and popular. And if you remember, around 81, 82, 83, everything blossomed.
Exploded.
And a lot of that was helped by TV, by the exposure of, what's this comedy thing? But knowing that, again, a comedy show, what's a comedy show, You mean like Milton Berle? No, not like Milton Berle. So it expanded to the
Tell
point.
me about the video. Tell me about that documentary that they made. We started talking about it. There's more I want to.
Oh, and Stand Up Stood Out.
On that.
Yeah. That kind of it did. It kind of.
When was that shot?
Over the years. It was put together about 4 years ago, I guess. But it goes back. Some of the footage, like Lenny had a little TV show on a local channel, so a lot of the footage, he's in it quite a bit. Well, he's good too, but it was he had access to that, And I mean, nowadays you could put this thing together a lot easier, and there'd be volumes of stuff.
And you said you were in the beginning of it?
Yeah, in the end, yeah, and. I was one of the mainstays of the whole Boston. Hence the Godfather thing. I used to take some of the kids under my wing and help them with their, go critique their act and help them out a little bit. We give small suggestions, not big because it's going to ruin somebody. But and they were very appreciative of that,
So one of the interesting things that was in that movie was that the guys didn't really think that there was any outlet, right? I mean, Carson was 3,000 miles away,
right?
And there was no talent searches going on.
Not
in
at
Boston.
all. Not at all. Not at all. And people did sometimes try to get down to New York to work at some of the clubs there, but that was a grind too, trying to go back and forth. And
Paul Provenza told me. I just had him on the other day. He went to school in Penn, University of Pennsylvania,
right?
And he was kind of like you with the spots. He would get spots at the Improv and drive up from Philly, just to get his spots on the Improv.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there weren't that many avenues to.
So, but one day you had someone come in your club.
Well, Jim McCauley came from over to the Ding Ho, and he wanted to see 5 of the best of Boston. So Barry Crimmins and myself, and we put it together, and we said, we'll give you 7. And he didn't want to do 7, but he decided he would. He came in, and he was pretty much blown away by one of the 2 guys that we added. We added Bobby Goldways, and we added Stephen Wright. And Stephen Wright was the one that got the pop. Now, all of us, the rest of us, thought we were going to be the one that got the pop, And,
tell me about that actually what happened, your conversation. Was the conversation with McCauley, or?
Not really, no. He called Stephen. That Stephen and I left a little early. We didn't hang around. Some of the other guys were trying to find out what was going on. And then when he called, I'm trying to remember, I think it was the next morning, that he called Stephen and said who it was, and Stephen goes, "Yeah, I'm sure it is," and hung up on him. And he called back a second time. He said, "No, here's blah, blah," and he hung up a second time.
Oh my God.
And then finally he said, "Look, you call this number and see what happened." He called, and they said it was the talent coordinators, and they wanted an album the next week, and he did go on the very next week, and he destroyed, and they had him back again. I think unheard of, like 8 days later. And from that, I mean, we all watched it on a little 8x10 TV at one of the comedy club
That
rooms.
must have been wild.
It was. We probably had maybe 15, 20 comedians watching, and the audience on an 8x10, black and white, and it was just, you could hear a pin drop when we were watching the thing.
And then the laughs that he got.
Yeah. And he goes, when he at the end, he said, "Well, wow, this is a realization of it. Are there any other guys like you in Boston?" He goes, "Yeah, they're all in my head." He couldn't remember what he wanted to say, which was a good thing to say.
It was a great joke, right? I mean, that was like perfect. And so, he got invited to sit down on
right away,
show.
First time out. Yeah. Which was that was unheard of, Kevin Meaney had the same thing happen to him later too. From out of it, I met him in San Francisco when I was just beginning to learn the process. I was in the competition out there, and he was part of that too. And I told him about Boston. He came up to Boston. He lived there for 20 years after that.
Oh,
yeah. So, but he did the Tonight Show, 5 or 6 years after that, and he got invited over to the thing. But as a rule, we were not, we still weren't recognized, we'll say, in the Boston people. And a lot of them eventually had to move to LA. And
tell me about Sweeney.
Oh, Steve?
I don't really know much about him.
Well, he's the king of Boston comedy. He's one of the ones that started originally. He got his master's, I think, at USC in theater arts, and and then he's had a couple of different TV shows. He has a movie out now, Sweeney Killing Sweeney, and he plays a woman and a guy in the movie, and so he was one of the mainstays back then too, you know. But it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was saying that place at Nick's, we were doing one show, which was, you know, just again a throwaway thing. It was a steak joint, and then they were complaining that they couldn't get into the steak joint because of the lines trying to get into our thing. And we went from one show to 2 shows, 3 shows, then upstairs and downstairs. I was doing 5 shows on a Saturday night, 5 shows, and I was trying to host and close the show.
And then there were so many clubs
all within 200 yards.
You got on your shoes and you just went from club to club. It was
we didn't have too much of the competition problem. Like in LA, if you worked at the Improv, you really didn't work the comedy store, right? And if you worked here,
you were a big star.
Yes,
and
yes,
took your star quality.
Okay, yeah, but as a rule, we work for these and not for this, and that wasn't allowed in Boston because the comedians controlled things, not the owners. The comedians controlled, and that changed, of course, too, but for the worse.
How does that happen? What do you mean?
Well, because the greed factor entered in, so that instead of 2 clubs or 3 clubs, there was as many as 8 or 9 little clubs, and people would go to a show because this was the whole thing, that whole comedy boom. But they'd go and see some 3 or 4 lousy acts, and they go, "This isn't very good." Well, they weren't going to the right shows, you know? So greed took over, and then the owners saw what kind of money they could make from it, and they took over and had their favorites, and you know you could smell it, you know, coming, and they took over how much people were getting paid and this and that, and who worked here, and so there was a kind of a revolt, and we had to try to get together. And you can't really have a union for comedians. It's an individual sport, you know, and so it's very difficult to get people on the same page, as you know from LA when they had all their problems, and there's still arguments that are going on from way back then, you know, but it got so big. I remember being at one of my shows. I go outside. It was snowing out. There were people with 2 or 3 inches of snow on them, waiting to get in. I said, I wouldn't stand out here to see me. What are you kidding me? Please, this is full. You know, you're coming in to see me. Are you aware of that? Yeah. It was interesting. So I still stayed in Boston pretty much the whole time, you know. Then I worked some of the cruise ships, and I did some LA stuff too. I was on David Letterman and of course, and I've done a few movies here and there, but nothing that people would remember. They have never been funny in a movie. So
just because I love talking about some of the different guys.
Yep.
Tell me about young Stephen Wright. I mean, his early days when you first saw him.
Well, he was as many of the guys, Dennis Leary and I think. Let me see. I'm trying to remember. There's about 7 or 8 that went to Emerson College.
Right.
So
Didn't Leno go to Emerson?
Yes. Yeah, it's a theater arts school. But when he first was performing, he played the guitar. Yes, played and made up his own songs, not song parodies, just nonsense, just songs. You know, like he said one about his girlfriend. I put her under the leaves in the fall. I'll have to see how she's doing in the summer. You know, and he'd look at the wall. He'd go in the corner onto the wall, and it was certainly different. But as I said, all the acts were different. There was no.
So
I'm like, think about Stephen Wright. There's not many Stephen Wright types, you know, and so.
So how was he in the beginning? Because it's so dry. And
he was
different.
He was very reserved and shy, but he was very funny, and everything he did was unique, you know. And people thought that they could write for him, but didn't really work too much. I did give him one joke, I think, one time about how'd you sleep last night, and he in his deadpan way, he goes, not too good. I made a couple of mistakes. And I used that on the Tonight Show, and which was good because it wouldn't be funny if I said it. So, but he was one of the inner core too, and we a lot of camaraderie. You know, we had softball teams. And,
I love that.
Yeah, and
I played for the improv softball team on Melrose.
Sure. I knew a lot of those guys too, and when it was really burgeoning, there was. I wasn't really that cutthroat. It wasn't like I'd want to be the best in the building, but I wanted you to be right up there.
Absolutely. When I've interviewed over 30 comedians now, and almost every one of them said we were there for each other.
Yeah.
That was what was so great about it. They can't answer for the 90s or the 2000s, but in those 80s, everyone was there for each other.
Yeah. And we used to drive sometimes like to Atlantic City to either work or play or whatever, and 4 or 5 comedians. And I remember saying one time, I said, if we get in a car crash and 5 of us die, no one's going to care. And you'd have the threesome, there'd be the opening act, the middle act, and the headliner. And a lot of times, only one guy had a car. So the opening act was usually somebody that had wheels.
Because his father had money. Because comedians didn't have the money back then.
That's when they said the father, because my parents, when I told them I was going to quit teaching, and I was on maximum pay now with the master's degree, and they're going, "What? You're gonna tell jokes? That's what you're gonna do for a living?" And my mom was very supportive. My dad, not quite as much. He was going, "So you're just gonna throw away your career?" I said, "Well, this is a different thing that I want to try." He goes, "Well, you got 2 kids, this," and he says, "I think you're out of your mind." So, but he came to one of my shows, and then he was pretty much impressed. And the thing that really impressed him was, maybe I had been doing it for a year or 2. I went into the bank, help him around. He was getting older, and the teller knew me and said, "Come right up here, Mr. Gavin." And so we get over, because that was pretty cool. I like that. So from that point on, he said, "There's some perks in this." So so I came from a family, 4 boys, and in Boston, everybody was, large families, mostly Irish, and if you only had 4 or 5 people, 4 or 5 kids in the family, so what's wrong? How come that's all you have?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, when you were at Northeastern, you didn't perform or anything?
No. I went to school for accounting and marketing, and I was never a performer.
Yeah.
I'll never be a performer. I was never a performer.
Okay.
I've been a TV and radio talk show host, so I guess I'm lying that if I'm in front of a mic on TV and radio for years and years and years, I guess that's performing. But no way that I'm up on that stage doing what you do.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, people always say, "But that must be so difficult." If you're pretty good at it, it's not that difficult. The difficult thing is writing, getting the material together. But from the beginning, I was okay.
If you got that first laugh.
Yeah.
It was a whole different world when you walked out on stage.
And people say, "What happens when you bomb up there?" I said, "Well, I really don't. There might be moments that don't work, but the moments seem like hours, And then if one thing doesn't work, in your head you're going, well, they're not going to like this. So why would they like? If they didn't like that, they're not going to like this. I'm in trouble." And that's happened a few times, not too much, but a few.
And the cruise ships, you told me that you worked for years on the cruise ships.
Sure.
That's a very, it doesn't seem like they're a demanding audience, right?
Well, when I first started doing, there was a negativity to it among comedians. They go, "Oh, you're a boat act?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, the boat act is making pretty good money, and you're not, and I'm working all the time, and you had to have a certain temperament too to do it, and in those days, very clean. Everything was sparkly clean, and so a lot of guys couldn't perform. They had a lot of trouble trying to get, when I worked in Australia, they couldn't get Australians were very bawdy and very, very dirty, I guess is the word, for lack of another term, and they couldn't work the ships. People were offended, so they were hiring U.S. acts to work in Australia and do the ships over there. So I was over there quite a bit.
How'd you like Australia?
Loved it, and New Zealand, and I've been to 163 countries, I think.
Wow.
Between cruise ships, and I did a lot of USO work, and that was another one. The USO, a lot of us did the tours with, and we go. Sometimes, like I was in Japan for like almost 2 months because we have 30-something bases there, and you'd go around to little bases, because it was so easy. Instead of having a whole camera crew, you'd have 2 cameramen, a sound guy, and 3 comedians.
3,000 soldiers.
Yeah, or more. I remember being in Croatia, and I said, we were outside, and I said, how many troops? I was asking the general, how many troops do we have stationed here? He goes, we don't have any troops here. And there were over 4,000 people there. And I said, no, really, how many people? He goes, we don't have troops here, so there's a lot of stuff going on we don't know about. But they were so thrilled to have any entertainment. They were great. I mean, you could snap a twig and
especially with your stuff, man. You could really get them going with your material.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, and we had all kinds of fun doing that, and they were so appreciative. And I said, no, we appreciate it more than you guys. This is an opportunity. So I did I don't know, 60 or 70 of those tours.
Wow.
But it was, and one night you'd be in a 5-star hotel, and the next night you'd be in a tent, and you never knew. So you had to be able to roll with the punches, which I think created good chops, good material for it, because you were exposed to all different types of things, and you had to be ready to, we're going to put on an extra show. When? In about a half an hour. Where? We're going to drive over this thing there. I remember I was on the back of a flatbed truck, and I'm going, did they have fireworks at this time of the year? And it wasn't fireworks. And I'm going, and they thought I was joking. No, that's not fireworks. But I got to work on aircraft carriers and did some. They love to show off the toys, that they have. And I got to drive tanks in Kuwait and stuff. Not a warfare thing, but more playing around and stuff. So it was. Yeah, that was quite an experience.
What a great life you've had, man.
Yeah, a lot of travel, and this has been great. I really haven't had a real job in about 35 years, so that's been good. So I think that I'm still going to continue. People say, when do you plan on retiring? I'm going, what? From what? What am I going to do? Although I'm getting a taste of it for this year.
Yeah, but let me tell you, after I saw you perform, I don't even want to say you could hold your own with any comedian. But you're as good as any comedian, if not better than absolutely most. Your material, your delivery. I don't like to say stuff about that because the comedians say, "What an idiot!" So I won't go.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I was just saying, boy, you hit
right on.
Yeah. Hitting it with the hammer right there.
So who were some of the guys other than the Sweeneys and Lenny?
I got a list right here.
You're biased. Who did you respect? Well, here, two-part question.
Okay.
Who did you grow up watching and said, I like that?
Oh, Richard Pryor and George Cowan, those two. And then everybody of my age thought about Jonathan Winters, but there was nobody like Jonathan Winters. But he was always one of the favorites of everybody. Robin tried to, be like Jonathan Winters, but nobody really was. But the fact that Pryor and Cowan would be able to take normal subjects, not jokes, and delve into them. I was always amazed that Richard Pryor, he could have a concept or something. He'd get an 8-minute monologue going, and if I did the same thing, I'd get a 45 seconds, maybe a minute. I don't think there's I've never seen anybody better.
And when he did his one-man show on...
Oh, yeah, on Sunset, and that was required reading and required viewing, for all comedians.
Comedians that could really go to town, use that for their education, and just watching it.
Yeah. And then when the boom came, there were a lot of rip-off people, a lot of comedians that really weren't very good, having comedy classes and making money, trying to teach people. I never believed in that, I think you could help someone if Bruce Starr had some innate talent and was there. You could hone it, but you're not teaching someone to be funny, per se, in front of a crowd, And we all know people that are funny in life, but not, you get them on stage and, so. It's just,
and all the comedians I've interviewed, they all say, they would go back to Jackie Vernon, and Jackie Mason, and Shecky Green.
Shecky Green is another great one,
And a whole different aspect was the Three Stooges and Abbott and Costello. Did they interest you when you were a kid?
Abbott and Costello, certainly, Bob Newhart was another one.
Oh, Bob Newhart. He's still alive.
Because he is, and performing.
I'm trying to get him on the show.
He was performing. He was that's one thing on TV I saw years ago. He was doing something with Rickles, and Rickles said, "Well, in those days, you were more famous than I am." He goes, "I still am." but he still performs, I believe.
And if you see Ellen DeGeneres' early work,
yeah,
she sounds exactly like Newhart.
Really?
The same stories, the same timing, exactly like Newhart.
Now, she was out of New York, right?
Well, she was out of New Orleans.
Oh, okay. Because I met her in New York first.
And I'll tell you a funny Ellen story. I don't think I might have told once before on the show. I was representing 35 comedians. I was working out of the 9200 Sunset Building in Hollywood. And one day I get this envelope full of pictures and a bio, and the pictures were kind of blurry. They weren't really professional, and the bio was not impressive at all. And, I had 35 comedians. If I was going to add someone, they have to be pretty, there already.
Yeah, right.
So I look at these pictures, all blurry. It's Ellen.
Right.
Sending me stuff from New Orleans because she heard about me and she was asking if I'd represent her. And I said, I'm sorry. And people say, what a big mistake that was. She would have had 10 other agents by the time she made it big.
Yeah.
But she wasn't even close to being ready when she asked me.
Yeah. Yeah, I met her first in New York, and we used to work the Improv a lot and the comic strip, and you drive down there sometimes and stay either in an abandoned building, we're doing that, or crash on somebody's couch, and then you go down and you get paid maybe $20, maybe $25, and you get there at 8 o'clock at night, and you might get on at 1:45 in the morning. And there'd be comedian after comedian. Sometimes 30 comedians would be up there, and everybody was trying to grab the ring, And of course, many people did not. But it was. I can't say it was a grind because it was enjoyable. Yeah. It was an adventure more than a grind.
In the earlier days, they would have it wasn't so much open mic night. I guess you could call it open mic night. And some of the guys that are household names now had to stand in line.
Sure.
And I think Paul Provenza said to me that he got there at 10 o'clock. They would start handing out the numbers at 7. The place would open at 8, and it would stay open until 4.
Okay.
All right, so we're enjoying ourselves boiling out here in Florida. We picked a boiling day.
That's quite all right.
One day is winter, the next day is spring. Winter.
Winter. I know winter, and you know winter from Boston.
Yeah.
If I have to be out of the work, as we are this year, this is the perfect place. If I was back home, not working, ooh, and in the freezing weather, I'll be in the newspapers for taking a few lives, I would think. I would have been a happy camper. People say, what do you like about Florida? I said, everything except that I still want to work, So maybe all this will end soon. That's it. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, one of the things I know is that people have been locked up and locked in for so long now. It's a year, almost to this week, that they're like, I don't want to say dying to get out and have a good time.
They are. When you came to that show the other night, people, I could have said, "Oh, see the milk here? I drank half of it." People are just thrilled to be out of their house.
Yeah.
And I think what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a rebirth of comedy.
Absolutely.
And especially any place where you can do it outdoors. So the warm weather spots are going to do great. And summertime, like I used to do a lot of the theater in the round. And so those type of things should be through the roof, I would think, once they can get more people allowed in. But people are itchy. You could feel it. There was not a tension, but an excitement before we went on the other night.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was very exciting. And then to see, I'm not going to say rusty, because I remember Bruce Smirnoff. You remember Bruce?
Yeah, pacing back and forth.
And somebody said to him, "What's the matter with you?" Bruce said, "I've only performed once in the last year," and he killed.
He did very, very well. Yeah.
Oh my! I haven't heard that much loud laughter. And did you ever see his one-man show at all?
No.
Unbelievable.
I've seen him work a lot, but yeah.
He did a one-man show. I saw him in Santa Monica or West LA. He did it at a theater. It was fantastic. I'd personally love to see him bring that back, because I think that he can tour with that, and he'd be very successful. So before we go, because it is a little hot out here, and I do appreciate all the time you're spending with me, are there any other interesting stories? I mean, you've had such an incredible career. Are there any other interesting stories, interesting experiences, with other comedians that
Well,
you want to share?
I did one. I used to open for a number of different people. One night is like Tom Jones was one who was very,
Wow.
very, very nice. And then I opened for Engelbert Humperdinck.
Wow.
And he was a little snotty. And I had my own dress room, and he came in, banged into through the door, and started saying, "Okay, you're going to do X amount of time." And I go, "Who are you?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Go outside and knock on the door." So he went outside, knocked on the door. I said, "Who is it?" He goes, "Engelbert." I said, "Engelbert who?" And we got along after that. Engelbert who?
Sometimes you got to lay down the law.
Yeah,
I mean,
And we actually, he was nice after that, but he was just trying to read me the riot act, which wasn't necessary. And I work with David Brenner quite a bit too.
Oh, wow.
He was a sweet guy, a real nice
Tell
person.
me about him.
I worked with him. He was a smart cookie too, and I would open for him. And then a couple of times when we were working near the Boston region, and he goes, "How about I open for you? Because these people love you so much." And he said, "It's going to be easier on me, but I'll take care of you." And he gave me a healthy amount of money to do it. Yeah. So, and at a time when the money, thank you. So he was very nice that way.
That was a terrible loss. He went way too young.
Yeah, and he was a fighter too. With the wife over the custody of his kids, and he was embroiled in that when I was there. But he was a sweet. Is a nice way to describe him. It really was. And then when I worked out in L.A., it's funny, like you were saying, name acts, if they came in, they would just bump you, but after a while, they weren't bumping me very much, so that helped, But, I always hated it if somebody's already name came in, instead of doing 10 or 12 minutes, would do 40 minutes, but the crowd, I guess, wanted to see it, There was always a pecking order, And so when I was working with Bud Freeman, same thing like that. Jay kind of helped me on that one too.
Yeah.
Drove me down on his bike and one of his many bikes.
Introduces you. Well, once somebody like that introduces you.
Yeah. But overall, I think I've been treated pretty nicely, and it's certainly a way of making a living, seeing the world. And I hope to continue doing it for at least another month.
Well, I have a vision of getting you and others back on the road, hopefully from my efforts, but it might not be. But I think that I've got some ideas, and your talent and your skills and experience should not be wasted.
Yeah, I don't think we're washed up by any means.
No, not at all. I want to thank you so much for
thank you, Bruce.
spending this time with me. You're really
and I'll bring you into the clinic for the heat press station right after
okay.
this.
Thank you. I was going to ask you about
Yeah, where's the nearest hospital? Thank you.
It's hot. My legs are burning up. I hope yours don't get this
I'm good.
red suntan on there. But listen, Florida, if you have to live someplace, Florida's a great place. A lot of the LA acts put it down and stuff, but you know what? The only thing for me missing from LA by living here is you pretty much know what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day.
Yeah.
In LA, you really didn't know. Something fun or exciting, you could get a call, an interview, an audition, a job.
Right.
That's the only thing different, and you just have to deal with the good and the bad.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think it's the good right here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce.
God bless.
That was fun.
Thank you. And I know that we'll be seeing more of each other.
I hope so.
Okay, thanks again. You're watching the 80s golden age of comedy. It just doesn't get any better than that. The Godfather of Boston Comedy.
And I'm not in my 80s. So.
Thank God. We still got a few more years. People, I've seen the acts go well into their late 70s.
Sure.
And certainly the comedians.
I was out with Dick Capri the other night, and he's at New York, Borscht Belt, 89 years old, still performing. 89. Yeah. So?
And George Burns tried to get to 100.
Yeah.
So, and listen, you guys, you're in a good business, and I know it's going to work out great.
Thank you.
God bless.
All right.
See you again. Bye-bye. And I never met Jimmy before, Jimmy Schubert.
Oh, really?
And again,
He was terrific. Yeah,
when he walked into that room,
well, he's a life force. You know?
I thought, oh, who is this guy? The mayor, or
Yeah.
mayor of Comedy Land, or
Yeah,
something?
he's the opposite. Look, when I used to travel with Lenny and some of these guys, I'd go on, and we'd both be on the same show. And at the end, people go, "Oh my God, you were the best guy here tonight. We thought you were his agent. You didn't say anything in the back room," which that's kind of the way I am. And Lenny's that way too. We're very Jackie Gleason, up, loud and raucous and whatever. And I'm not that way. So yeah. So Schubert is terrific.
He was terrific the other
But he's
night.
got that style.
He was like a machine gun. He just kept going and going. What did he do, an hour?
He did 35. I think we were all supposed to do 20. Everybody else kept to the thing. It didn't matter. He's a lost guy, so it was all right. But I think somebody had some comments on it because the guy wanted to do another show, and I'm busy. I couldn't do it. He said, this time we're going to have you headline. I go, well, I didn't know there was going to be a headline. I thought it was just everybody was doing 20 minutes, And so he called me and said it was tough following me. So it'll be the same for me to follow you. So
Yeah. It was a great show. I mean, you three guys were fantastic.